I worked the night shift at a municipal records annex on the edge of the city. It was a temporary assignment that stretched into almost a year. The building was a converted warehouse with no public access after 6 p.m., and my role was limited to intake and verification of digital submissions that came in overnight. Most nights were quiet. The work followed a checklist: download, compare, flag discrepancies, move on. The first irregularity happened in late October. I remember because the air had turned dry and the heaters clicked on for the first time. At 11:17 p.m., a new submission appeared in the queue. That was normal. What was not normal was that it carried my employee ID as the submitting officer. I assumed it was a clerical error. The system sometimes duplicated metadata when files were reopened too quickly. I opened the record. It was a routine zoning variance request. Everything about it looked standard except the timestamp showed it had been created at 11:02 p.m. I had been logged in since 10:45. I had not created it. I checked my activity log. It showed nothing between 10:51 and 11:19. That gap was unusual but not unheard of. The system lagged. I flagged the record for review and moved on. The next night it happened again. Different form, same employee ID. The timestamp fell inside another blank space in my activity log. This time I took screenshots. I emailed it. They replied the next afternoon, suggesting a cache issue and advising me to clear my session before logging in. I followed their instructions. For a week, nothing else occurred. The work returned to its usual pattern. I stopped thinking about it. In early November, the security guard on duty changed. The previous guard had been reassigned, and a man named Lewis took over the night shift. We did not interact much. He sat in the lobby, watched videos on his phone, and did his rounds at the top of each hour. He signed the log sheet on a clipboard kept by the door. The routine was fixed. One night around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my office. That was normal during rounds. What caught my attention was that the footsteps paused outside my door and did not move on. I waited. After about 30 seconds, they continued down the hall. When Lewis passed my door later that night, I asked if everything was fine. He said yes. I asked if he had stopped earlier. He said he had not. I checked the log sheet the next morning. It showed his initials at 1 a.m. as expected. The submissions resumed a few nights later, always between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., always with my ID, always during gaps in my activity log. The content varied. Some were incomplete drafts. Others were fully filled forms that mirrored cases I had processed earlier in the week. In 2 instances, the addresses matched my own neighborhood. I stopped flagging them and started saving copies. I wanted a clearer pattern before escalating again. I told myself it was a technical problem that would eventually be identified. Around this time, I noticed the building itself behaving differently. The motion lights in the hallway outside my office would turn on without obvious cause. I assumed they were overly sensitive. The HVAC system cycled irregularly. That was common in older buildings. One night, the printer in the copy room started up on its own. It printed a single page, then stopped. The page was blank except for a header with my name and employee number. I threw it away. I began to check my reflection in the darkened window more often than necessary. I did not feel watched exactly. It was more a habit of verification. I was alone most nights, aside from Lewis. I asked him if anyone else had keys to the building. He said maintenance had access during the day. At night, it was just us. He asked why. I said there had been some system issues. He nodded and returned to his phone. The first time I saw movement where it should not have been possible was mid-November. I was reviewing a batch of scan documents when I noticed a shadow pass under my door. It moved from left to right as if someone had walked by. I checked the time. It was 12:34 a.m. I opened the door immediately. The hallway was empty. The motion lights were off. I walked to the lobby. Lewis was at his desk. He looked up when he saw me. He said he had not left his post. I checked the security cameras the next day. The footage from the hallway between 12:30 and 12:40 was corrupted. The file existed, but it would not play. Other segments from the same night were fine. I reported this to it again, attaching the screenshots and files I had saved. This time, they scheduled a remote session. During the call, the technician shared my screen and scrolled through the logs. He paused at one point and asked me if I had been working from home recently. I said no. He said the system showed my credentials logging in from an external IP on several nights. The times matched the submissions. I asked where the IP was located. He said it resolved locally, within the building. He suggested changing my password and issuing a new badge. That was done the following week. For a few nights, the queue remained clean. Then the submissions returned. This time the employee ID was not mine. It was a variant, one digit off. The name field was blank. The content had changed. The forms were no longer routine requests. They were internal notes, short entries describing actions taken during the night shift. They referenced tasks I had completed, but with slight differences. In one, it noted that a file had been moved to a different folder than I remembered using. In another, it mentioned a conversation with the security guard that had not happened. I compared the notes to my own memory and to the logs. In most cases, the system sided with the notes. I began to doubt small things, whether I had locked my car, whether I had eaten dinner. I started writing down my actions in a notebook, time-stamped by hand. It was a way to anchor myself. One night, I found a note in the notebook that I did not remember writing. It was in my handwriting. It listed 3 file numbers and the phrase, "already corrected." The file numbers matched submissions that had appeared under the variant ID. I showed the notebook to no one. In early December, Lewis stopped showing up for his shift. I learned this when a supervisor called me at midnight to ask if everything was all right. A different guard arrived an hour later. She did her rounds quietly and did not linger near my office. The next morning, I asked about Lewis. I was told he had quit without notice. The building felt emptier after that, despite the presence of another person. The motion lights activated more frequently. The printer jammed and spit out half-formed pages with headers and no body text. The submissions began to include timestamps that overlap with each other. 2 records created at the same minute, both attributed to the variant ID, both describing actions that could not have occurred simultaneously. I considered the possibility that someone was using my credentials and accessing the building after hours. There was no sign of forced entry. The cameras showed nothing conclusive. One night shortly before my shift ended, I received a submission that consisted of a single sentence. It read, "You do not need to stay." I closed the file and logged out early. I did not return the next night. I called in sick. Then I used my remaining leave. When I came back, the system had been audited. The anomalies were attributed to a synchronization error after a software update. The corrupted footage was archived. The external logins were marked as false positives. I was reassigned to a different department in a different building. Months later, out of curiosity more than concern, I accessed the public portal from home. I searched for the records that had troubled me. Most were gone. A few remained, amended and clean. One record caught my attention. It was an internal note, dated after my reassignment. It referenced the night shift at the annex and listed an employee ID that matched the variant. The note ended with a status update. It said the process was continuing as expected.